Baba's birthday celebration, February 18th, 1926. And this photograph, as I said, was taken the next morning, February 19th, 1926, where Baba gave darshan to the people remaining from the 50,000 people who had come to Meherabad the previous day. These people had stayed overnight because there was such a crowd they couldn't get an opportunity to have Baba's darshan on his birthday, so they stayed at Meherabad, mostly in the Sai Darbar. And that morning, he gave darshan. His back is to here, the table cabin, sitting on the gadi there that day. A few days later, at Meherabad, Baba had the marriages of 6 of the older untouchable Hazrat Babajan school boys. He had arranged their marriages some weeks before, and there was a joint ceremony held there at Meherabad in the Sai Darbar for all of these poor older boys. The matches had been made. All the families were there gathered together, and there was a big celebration. They all had Baba's darshan. It was a lovely scene. There was one girl also from the school who had been engaged. The parents found a match, and she was engaged. But after the engagement, they found out that the boy that she was engaged to was a Christian, so they had a Christian ceremony elsewhere. The ceremonies that Baba had for the 6 boys was a Brahmin priest, according to the Hindu ritual. So now the parents of the Hindu girl from Arangaon thought that they should have their ceremony redone with the Hindu ceremony by the Brahmin priest at Sai Darbar. Baba said, nothing doing, absolutely not. And of course they got the idea that it has nothing to do with ceremony. This ceremony was only to appease their notions of religious importance. It had nothing to do with the match, which was what he really wanted. And so they got this, with this mistake in the girl's engagement, the point was brought home that these religions and ceremonies, again, had nothing to do with it. It's his wish. That's how much he took charge of the lives of these people. He took care of them. He even engaged them. He didn't make the choices. He allowed the families to make the choices. But he said, these 6 can get engaged. I'll do the ceremony here. Baba paid for everything, and he paid for the feast of all of the guests from Arangaon who came for this wedding. On the 24th was the last rehearsal for the play on the life of Shivaji. By that point, the residents of Meherabad had seen this play so often that the dress rehearsal was they could almost by that point recite the lines of the play themselves. And that day, Baba and the Mandali bade the boys again. This was a common thing before a big event. They would make sure that everybody was fresh and ready. So the next day was another point in celebration of Baba's birthday on his actual calendar date by the Western calendar, that play was performed that evening, which went way late into the night. And of course, it was a big success. They had been rehearsing this thing now for about 6 weeks. So that happened there. A number of the guests who had been staying longer, including Baba's family members, had left then the next day. Jamshed, his brother, had left the day just after, and on the 27th, Baba got the mail, as usual after morning inspections, went to the Makan, and there was also a telegram there from his father informing him that his brother Jamshed had just passed away that morning. So Baba gathered the Mandali there together. And many of them who knew Jamshed very well were really shocked. He had just left the day before, and now he's dead. He wasn't very old. He had a little illness in the past, but it wasn't anything that they would consider life-threatening. So Baba asked them, any of you feel this? They said, yes, Baba, naturally. We feel it. He says, it's all due to false emotion. It's hypocrisy. All your feelings are due to selfishness. Baba, he was your brother. Don't you feel it? Yes, he was my brother. I have warned him. Baba's writing all this. I warned him he shouldn't go away from Meherabad, but he insisted, and see what happened. Anyway, he said, it doesn't matter. Although he was my brother, I know he's not dead. He's resting within me, and I can see him easily as I see you. So I don't feel anything about this. Somebody said, but how are we to feel? Here he was, and now he's gone. And he said, Baba said, that's where you make the mistake. You don't understand it. And somebody else said, but how are we ordinary people supposed to get the understanding here? He said, finally brought them to the point, by listening to those who understand the secrets of life and death. And then he proceeded to give a long, beautiful explanation about life and death in the whole process. And from that incident, we have the first extensive and really beautiful, articulate explanation from Baba about the subject. It happened that day. There was a period, now there's a photograph coming up, and I think that photograph was taken to this during this period of early March. Baba was now spending his days, as I said, in the cabin that was built on the Sidar Bar stage where the play had been performed. He was sitting there during the day, doing his writing there, the 4 hours of writing on the book during the day. And it was where people would come and meet him. That on March 21st, for Jamshedi Nowroz again, they invited Pyaro Kawal to come and perform at Meherabad. The 29th, Baba began also sleeping in the cabin on Sidar Bar platform. So his seat was officially moved there from the table house here onto the Sidar Bar platform. Or he would only leave there for 4 to 6 hours a day doing inspections of the rest of Meherabad. Otherwise, everything was there for that period during the summer. One of the Mandali, Mohan Shahane, was also involved in teaching in the school, and he, because he was a qualified person, freshly experienced, developed a debate club for the boys too. So that was a new experience for them and a new entertainment for them. Learning how to debate and articulate problems and solutions. On 1st of April, Baba decided he has to improve the nutrition for the school. So he began a milk ration program for the boys, which included tea for the Mandali with milk in it, finally. So from now on, the Mandali could have tea with milk in it. That was their ration. Didn't last very long, but as long as they could get this amount of milk. The problem was mostly this milk was supplied by local farmers, and there could only be so much milk procured on a daily basis. So based upon that, the ration was distributed. There was another thing the schoolboys were doing. They had this routine of calisthenics and marching drills. You know how schools in India, they had the kids do these things, and it's all like, it looks like this, and then they march and they do all kinds of things. Very regimented thing, but they learn regularity and discipline and working in groups like that. Well, the illiterate low-caste people in Arangaon hadn't seen so much of this before, so the rumor began again in Oregon that Meherabad is actually training these boys to be soldiers, and they're going to be sent to fight in one of those wars for the British Empire. They're nothing but cannon fodder. So with this rumor going on, the parents came, some of the parents came to say, we're taking our boys out tonight. You can't keep them here at night. We're afraid if we let them, because some of the boys, Baba wanted to stay in the ashram at night. Now, let me clarify one thing. There were boys from Oregon, there were boys from Bombay, Pune, Nasik, and outside places, and those boys had to be residing at Meherabad as well as doing their schooling there. Some of the Oregon boys were allowed to go home in the evenings. Some were not. Many of the lower caste boys were also kept there. So that day when that rumor started, the parents came and said, we want our boys to come home at night. They might be sent out any night. And we don't know, in the cover of darkness, and they'll be gone to some war. And that'll be the end of them. So Baba said, that's the way you feel? 44 of the untouchable boys were expelled again. So there were 84 boys from Oregon, local boys. 44 of them were low caste boys, and they were all expelled from the school. Again, then they realized they made a mistake. The boys didn't want to leave, and the boys were crying, and so the parents again realized they made a mistake and came back repenting. And again, Baba gave them a lecture. But to drive home the point this time, Baba told them, I can't just forgive you, you must do penance. 3-day fast. You, all of you people, 3-day fast. You must do it. If you agree, fine. If not, keep your boys. That's it. It's the end of it. So they agreed to do it. So these people had to fast for 3 days. And at the end of the 3 days, Baba went to Oregon and gave them himself milk and bakri to break the fast. And then the next day he gave a feast in Oregon to all of the low caste people. There were also agreements they had to sign, promising that they would not do this again. Actual legal agreements, and many of them just had to do the ink and the thumbprint. They didn't, but they were explained what this agreement is. But the following day, in a gesture of good faith, Baba, after the fast was ended, Baba called them and tore up these contracts to show them he was expressing faith in them to follow their word too. The problem with Meherabad, logistically, was always a water shortage. And with a big colony there, this was inevitable, especially in the drier months. So again, that month in April 1926, there were restrictions on the water that could be taken out of the regular well. So it was reduced to only drinking water allowed. They had another well, and then there was the well by the railway that was being excavated still. So they had to try and make do, but there wasn't enough water. So at this point, they had to begin bringing water in by tankers on bullock carts. You may have seen them. We had one of those at Meherabad still in our time. They don't use bullock carts anymore, but we had one, and that's the way they had to bring water to Meherabad for the coming months to get through that summer. But at this point, Baba wouldn't leave Meherabad. This was particular important work during this first long stay at Meherabad. And it couldn't be disturbed because it involved Oregon itself. This was not work that could be done elsewhere. It had to be done there because it involved that interaction with the village as a spiritual archetype to uplift humanity in that depressed condition. Ram's birthday was celebrated again. Baba himself served tea and shira to all of these guests who had come. A few days later, some pilgrims were on their way to Pandharpur, repeating Tukaram, 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 marching with their orange flags. And as they walked past, Baba said, he made the comment, they can chant Tukaram for hundreds of years, but what good will it do if Tukaram is not in their hearts? And he said, anyway, they're on their way for pilgrimage, and he told Sailor, one of the Mandali, one of his boyhood chums, who had become one of the Mandali, anyway, we should feed them, so go ahead and feed them. So Sailor just took the food that was ready for the boys, lunch, and fed these pilgrims. Baba said, feed the pilgrims. And when it's time for the boys' lunch, somebody said the boys' lunch is short. So Baba called Naja and said, why is the boys' lunch short? She said, I don't know, Baba, I made the same amount I did yesterday. He shoved her. At that point, Sailor said, no, it's my fault, I'm sorry. I took their food to feed those pilgrims. You said, feed those pilgrims. And Baba gave the gesture, whatever it was, you Irani idiot. You gave them food and you didn't tell Naja to make up the difference? So the punishment was, Sailor was tied to a post. For 3 days, no food or water. Tied, lashed to the post there. This is punishment in the middle of Meherabad.
What about bodily functions?
Well,
Like they got to hold it over.
after 1 hour, Baba came with some sweets, smiling and teasing him. And then the joke was over. Untied him. Anyway, Baba and the Mandali's food was given to the boys, and they waited for the deficit to be made up. But Baba's way of teaching a lesson and still having a sense of humor again. Let's go to the next image. This is a digitally regenerated image that Stephanie Shepard made, combining things from a number of different photographs that we could use. We wanted to get a look at the original. You've seen this yesterday. This is now the way the water tank looked then, before doors were in it. And there was a steel ladder that went up here. And there was a door here. Whenever Baba would go into the East Room during these few years, whenever he would go up the hill, because remember now, this was all there was up the hill still. Meherabad at that time was defined as the colony down the hill between the railway tracks out to the east past the leper asylum. The hill was called the hill. But Baba would still make use of this occasionally. And whenever Baba would go up the hill, the women would rush because their life was confined within that barrier of the compound built to the north of the post office. But there was a high point in that compound from an old road that used to cross the tracks there before the camp was built. And they would rush to that point to peek over the bamboo barricade to watch Baba walk up the hill. And of course he knew they were watching, and every once in a while he would walk up the hill and turn around and wave, and they would all frantically wave, and this would continue. And finally Baba would climb the ladder here and give them one last wave like that, and they would wave enthusiastically back, and then he would gesture for them, go back to work, and they would all go back in. So this is where that, you've heard that story from the women Mandali, this is where that would take place on this side. Now let's go to the next image. This is a view from the west side. This is how it looked before any of the other images. This is also a digitally regenerated image here. You see how much different these steep steps are than the ones we have now that went up to that little room at the top here. Baba had been saying that he wanted to begin doing seclusion work here up on the hill. So on May 3rd, he announced that he was going to begin seclusion there that day in the morning. And he said at that time he was planning to be there about a month or so. So quickly, all the different departments had last-minute briefings with Baba in the morning, any special directions, and of course, as Baba would usually do before any change in program, remind them to be absolutely diligent about their duties, be focused on the responsibilities, no lapses, communicate with each other, all of those things. Again, repeatedly, always those messages. So that evening, when Baba went up into seclusion, later in the afternoon, there was a procession again up the hill, singing music with the procession as it made its way up the hill. Again, more bhajans up the hill. And then Baba sent most of them down. He kept his brother Jal and Mal as attendants. And that seclusion was in this room here, the west side of the tank. Baba was in that room about a week in seclusion with them, and then, to the surprise of the Mandali, he came down the hill and would spend at least a portion of the day, usually most of the day, down the hill, engaged again in the activities down the hill. But he would always go up and sometimes spend more time. Adi remembered the story once, he told us, where Baba was not down the hill. It was during this time, but not during the specific seclusion time. So he went up the hill to see Baba and found him in the tank, climbed up and inside, and saw Baba in there weeping. And Baba never explained why. Maybe he took a good long look at the burden and the work ahead or the condition of the world. We don't know, but it's like that. It was during that period Baba was in here. One of those days, Pendu got irritated again, threatened to walk away. So it took some of the Mandali an hour or so to calm him down, get him to come back to Meherabad. On the 17th, Baba gave a lecture to the circle committee people in the Mandali, and he said, "I beg you with folded hands, I bow to your feet. Please, take your duty seriously. Don't go away from me till I break my silence. I can't leave Meherabad until the circle is realized. I will not, but do not make me break my silence before the appointed time by being lethargic in your duties and not obeying my directions." So the Mandali were a little surprised at the intensity of Baba's message that day to them. The next day, Baba had asked Vishnu to tell Chanji to give 2 hours of tuition instead of the usual 1 to the son of one of the hired compounders who worked in the hospital and dispensary. But there was a misunderstanding, and Chanji gave only 1 hour that morning, and that afternoon Baba asked Chanji if he had given the 2 hours to tuition. He said, "No, Baba, just the 1." Vishnu was called. What happened? Oh, there was some misunderstanding, something happened, somebody forgot, and that was a lapse in the order. So Baba called one of the other Mandali, "Kisan, take a cane and beat my hand 3 times." Kisan was reluctant, but he said, "It's my order. I'm taking it for Vishnu's mistake." Vishnu was shocked. I stood there, stunned for a moment, and then became hysterical and went out into just the grounds of Meherabad, shouting and muttering and in despair about this issue. As I told you yesterday, Vishnu was strong enough to take Baba's abuse. Didn't matter, even if it wasn't his own fault. But they couldn't bear to see Baba take punishment on himself for them. There were visitors there who thought, "This man must be rehearsing for a play. You know, Baba had that play in February. They do rehearsals. He's very dramatic. He must be rehearsing for a play." That night, Baba asked them at the nightly discussion, "Do I need anything? Is there something I need? Do I need anything?" They thought, "No, what could you need? You don't need us." Baba said, "If there's anything I need, I require, I want, it's only love." Now, the very next day, Chuggan was asked something by Baba. And he gave some vague answer. Baba did not like that kind of ambiguity. You had to be absolutely direct with him. It wasn't a definite answer, and Baba was irritated and bowed down to Chuggan and said, "You don't do any work here, you just relax. Do it up, just relax, don't pressure yourself. Don't be concerned." And Chuggan had the same reaction of Pendu the day before, initially, which was to be shocked and stunned for a few seconds. But instead of becoming hysterical and staying at Meherabad, he just bolted off into the fields, running. And Baba sent, he knew who the good fast runners were, "Go after him." So he sent a few of the men running after Chuggan. Stop him. He wouldn't respond to calls. "Baba's calling, stop." He wouldn't even turn his head. He just kept running. They couldn't catch him. Baba, there was a little one-horse, little pony cart that Baba would sometimes ride in. Baba himself got into that, and he tried to go after him, but it was too rough. So Baba called Rustam, had him take the horse and gallop after Chuggan. They finally caught up to Chuggan. Rustam brought him back on the horse after about 4 miles off into the horizon. And he was taken back to Meherabad, and they just resumed duties as if nothing had happened. And the diarist, Pandava, writes, except for the heavy breathing and perspiration of all these men who had to run after him, it seemed like nothing had happened. Now there was another 12 boys enrolled into the Babajan school by that point. So there was a problem with the milk ration. So the Baba said during the discussions that day, well, we have two options. We can either limit the ration of everyone with the boys and the Mandali, or we can eliminate the men's ration, which is milk in their tea, so the boys can have milk. And of course, it was eliminating the men's milk in the tea that happened. So after having milk tea for about 6 weeks, they were back to the usual Meherabad tea with no milk. On the 22nd, the boys were bathed again by Baba and the Mandali. And that afternoon, not long after that, a windstorm broke out over Meherabad. A severe windstorm. Sheets from the roofs of the building blown off, things blowing around, dust, covering of dust everywhere. At the height of the pitch of the storm, Baba writes, "Play the gramophone." Play the gramophone? They couldn't even hear it, but Baba played the gramophone. So one of the Mandali started playing the gramophone. And within a few minutes of the gramophone playing, the wind calmed down. It seemed to do the trick. But also a certain incident happened that day, which was, the Satta family, including the Jeswalas, were there on a summer vacation, visiting, and they were about to leave. And Baba was at Sai Darbar. And I don't know if some of you recall this, that there was like a lota there, and Baba tossed it up in the air like that, and it just floated there for a few seconds. And it fell back into his hand. He said, "Now go." And they left, and the weather was fine. Peculiar. Erich would recall that incident. He was 10 years old and thinking, interesting. A few days later, Dr. Karkal had informed Bob and the Mandali that there was a conjunctivitis, almost an epidemic with some of the schoolboys there. It was a very serious thing because it was a contagious eye disease. So after discussions with the Mandali, Baba decided, and the Mandali were in favor, that to keep these boys quarantined, it would be better if they establish a completely new ward only for eye diseases. So that was also done there at Meherabad then. Let's go to the next image. Upasi Maharaj's birthday was celebrated that year on May 29th, and these circulars were sent out. This will give you a good idea about the activities that were scheduled for that. Can you read that? Is that focus good on that? Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. You can try the focus on the lens a little bit and see if it improves. Yeah, it's a little sharper. That's better? Yeah. It's nice. Can you read those? Interesting?
Yes. Lot of food. 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. only food.
Yes. The first day was feeding, so the Mandali got up at 4 in the morning and began the preparation work for the feeding that day, which began at 10 a.m. for 6 hours. On that day, they weren't sure how many people were going to come, so they cooked in small batches so that there wouldn't be any wastage. Baba always was insistent that there would be the exact amount of food. There shouldn't be too much, and there shouldn't be too little. So it was always a stressful thing for the cooks to target the amount. But the solution for this was, of course, they didn't know how much they would need. So the solution was small batches and be ready just to keep supplying the food. So hundreds of people were fed, but don't know exactly how many during that 6-hour period. That was the activity for the first day. But you can see all the things that happened in the next days. Running, they would have 3-legged races, where you two people tie their legs together, and the sack races, and all of those things. There were special pandals set up at the sports field for the Baba, the women, and the guests to be able to sit in the shade and watch these events. It's a very entertaining thing. Let's look at the next page. You see all this also, musical and elocution competitions. Students of any school may compete for the events. Individuals have passed matriculations or school leaving examinations may also complete. And any resident of Meherabad may compete. Let's go to the next one. Wheelbarrow race, obstacle race, thread and needle was a thing for the girls. They used to do back-to-back and thread and needle. I don't know how that works, but flour, this is another one for one girl and one boy. There was something with a flour, carrying flour and something. Tug of war. There was a tug of war between teachers and students. Sack races, 1-mile cycle race. Baba would compete sometimes in these competitions too. And Pendu told me, nobody could beat Baba in the slow cycle race. It's very difficult to do. He said the secret is you have to take the air out of the tire. It has to be very flat. But nobody could beat Baba because not only could he stand still, but you couldn't just stand still. You had to still move, but be very slow. And if you fall over, you lose. So nobody could beat Baba in that. Musical competition, elocution competitions, and Atyapacha team competitions and some cricket. They had Atyapacha teams and cricket teams.
What is Atyapacha?
Atyapacha is a game that's played with lines, and Baba gave an explanation about that game, which I won't go into, but he said it represents the spiritual path.
Isn't the one where people sit like this on the ground? And
That's musical chairs.
It's musical chairs.
Musical chair.
There's a little drawing of an Atyapacha
Yeah.
It's like Gillian.
thing on the map there.
Okay, anyway, it's an interesting thing. I thought you might be interested in reading that. This is how they would, I just thought how Upasi Maharaj must have been. Even Upasi Maharaj must have chuckled when he heard about the fun at Meherabad in his honor. Funny thing. Okay. Let's go to the next image. This photograph, I believe, was taken in early March 1926. I say that through process of elimination. I couldn't find another slot in this year, and we know it has to be 1926 because it's one of the rare photographs that we also have, again, Arjun Supikar right here. And these are Babajan schoolboys here. These are not Meher Ashram schoolboys. I believe this is Angoplita, the man who used to give the Puranic lectures on Sundays and Thursdays. Naval Talati, Vishnu, Kakashane, and more of the boys up here. Yeah, Chanji is here. One of the Mandali Gadikar was one of the young guys then, successfully passed his his college examinations, so a tea party was given. And for the entertainment that evening, after Gadikar's celebration, was Baba said, all the Mandali, each of you sing a solo tonight. And you have 15 minutes to prepare. And again, the entertainment wasn't so much this, some people could sing, Adi could sing, a few others could sing. But the real entertainment was watching each other and this perspiration and nervousness. That was the real entertainment. But this is the way Baba made people have the courage to just be open with each other and be unconcerned what people thought of them. There was a famous strongman in India named Ramamurti Naidu. I don't know if he was known as the Indian Sandow during that time. He had a circus, and he brought his circus to Ahmednagar. And when he came to Nagar, he came to Meherabad to have Baba's darshan, dressed in his full costume, and invited Baba to come to the circus. So Baba said, good idea, we'll try to come. They were scheduled to visit the circus, but Adi couldn't arrange the bus in the last minute. They had a company after all, and they were responsible for routes, and that evening Adi couldn't come through with the bus. So Baba said, it doesn't matter. He said, really speaking, when you understand it, this whole creation is nothing but a circus. We're looking at it all the time. We don't need to go to see one. But the entertainment for the evening wasn't lost. So that night Baba said, all right, we'll have our own program. Tonight, each of the Mandali gives a lecture, but in a language you don't understand. So again, you imagine that. Suddenly you have to stand up and give a speech in a language you don't understand. Even more than the entertainment for singing solos, can you imagine the expression of these garbled sentences and sounds that people were trying to make and watching their discomfort and their nervousness? So that was how Baba broke down these barriers between them so they could be absolutely free to express themselves. People who had seen, Nashuan will tell you, these people, the old Mandali were like that. If Baba, any time, even in the old days, stand up and give a speech, they would do it. People laugh, didn't matter. Just do whatever Baba said.
Did anybody tell you what the speeches were about?
No, nothing. It's just, if you give a speech in a language they don't understand, even they couldn't tell you what it was about. But no topic. It was nonsense. But it was just an exercise in breaking down it was an exercise in obedience, breaking down the barriers in a very humorous way. That was really Baba's style. A few days later, the Bombay Theatrical company came through Ahmednagar, and Baba did take the Mandali to see that. His uncle, Shireen Mai's brother, Rustam, was one of the actors in the Bombay Theatrical company. And Baba was also involved in this work in the early days after he was realized. He was involved in theatrical work. After the first act, Baba didn't watch the play anymore. He went backstage and freely conversed with the actors, almost to the point of distraction, talking with everybody, moving around, looking at things, being his very active self. Yes?
Is that Rustam became Meru's father?
No, that's a different Rustam. Yes. Rustam Mama. He's known as Rustam Mama. We have photographs of him in the later years. A few days later, they had a tea party for Mohan Shane, who also graduated from college. And during that tea party, Mohan described his experience. He said he went for the examination and he was really not confident about his level of English. Didn't know what to do, so he put the book there and he repeated Baba's name for a few minutes and he opened the book and just memorized one page. And he said to his surprise, when he took the examination, it was the very page he had memorized. He said he swears that's the only thing that allowed him to pass the English part, otherwise he would have failed the examination. On June 16th, Baba told the Mandali that he was going to do a partial fast now till February. And again, he did that thing where he incorporated the fasting of the Mandali, engaged them, and each would be assigned a day to also fast along with Baba after increments of a particular amount of time. During those weeks, Baba was giving a lot of explanations about the circles of the perfect master, his own circles, what the meaning was, how the mechanics, the spiritual mechanics of all of that was. And also continued all of the grinding work. Baba himself, as I said, sometimes would grind grain for over 2 hours a day. And if anybody was sick from the schedule of other people grinding, he would sometimes take their positions. And he had started another interesting thing after he came down from the hill during the seclusion. Oh, one thing I think I may have forgotten to mention, during that seclusion up there in the West Tank, Baba was continuing his work of writing the book there. So it was the fourth important place, or the fifth important place, really the fourth important place in Meherabad, where Baba had written the book for any scheduled amount of time. And it's interesting that he started in the Jopti, went the Table House West, went across the road to the Saidar Bar West, and then went up the hill to the West Room, where he did the majority of the writing of the book. After he had come down there, he started another thing, which was daily he would pick the dirty laundry of 5 of the boys to wash. Besides the bathing work, that was an additional thing that he didn't miss for as a daily exercise. On the last day of June, Baba told the Mandali that he would stop giving these explanations. He had been giving these explanations during the previous 3 months, especially after the birthday celebration, when he began sitting at the cabin inside our bar. He was giving these explanations, and now there was a difference. Whereas in 1925, he had been giving those explanations, random subjects of spirituality, the Sadguru, one day, light and darkness, yogas, different things. But now he was giving, there was a regularity and a continuity to these explanations from that time. But on June 30th, he said he was going to stop the explanations the next day. So when Baba came down the hill the next day, the Mandali thought it might be a hint that he's going to start speaking. But instead of speaking, Baba informed them that next day, July 1st, that he's decided to extend the silence at least until February the following year. So now they know Baba's not going to break his silence on the anniversary, but rather extend his silence at least until February. And that day, July 1st, Baba, instead of, now he's been sleeping up the hill in the West Room, But that day, he went up the hill in the evening, but came right back down with his bedding and slept at Sai Darbar again for a few nights. Then he moved back to the table cabin. Now I'm going to read you something that's really good, a very nice description here of the 1 year anniversary of Baba's silence. This is a part of the combined diary entry for that day. After beginning to observe the silence, Baba has been very regular in explaining deep divine subjects. So much so that since the last 4 months, the silent lectures were given so frequently that if put together, they would make a big volume in itself. The deeper explanations that Baba has given during this period are contained in separate notes taken by Dada Chanji. And these deeper explanations were never scribbled out or conveyed by a few signs in a general way. In spite of his silence, Baba never looked nonplussed, ill at ease, or hesitating. Every member of the Mandali who was fond of the explanations was made to fully grasp the complicated significance with repetitions and many side explanations and examples. In this way, really speaking, a page of the explanations written by Chanji means the result of many fully written slates and a long time of signaling on the part of Baba. Those explanations which were mostly given during that first year, came to be known as the intelligence notebooks, which were ultimately edited and published as Infinite Intelligence. And as we saw yesterday, the one page of an example that also was contained in this intelligence notebooks, the subject that was published as In God's Head. The one example we have of Baba giving a discourse by writing in that 17-month period. The diary entry for July 10th continues. The work he does daily, namely grinding, washing clothes, bathing the boys, writing, occasionally tending the poor, attending to the backward state of the village untouchables, looking after the general management, keeping an eye on the Mandali, and allowing interviews to hundreds of visitors, is not only hard, but usually requires a lot of talking. And though Baba never avoided expressing anger, displeasure, joviality, seriousness, mirth, or amazement, still no one ever remembers having heard Baba utter so much as an oh or an ah. He is freely taking part in games, playing and running with quick movements such as a game like Atyapatya or cricket requires. And when at an exciting moment, at least a chance outcry is just possible, none was ever heard. It was no wonder that the Mandali insisted upon observing the anniversary of this wonderful display of superhuman control of the tongue in a befitting manner. And all the Mandali observed a fast of 24 hours with Baba that day, and it was a complete holiday for Meherabad. The school dispensary and all the working departments, wherever possible at Meherabad, on those days where things were closed down, like holidays, was closed.
This grinding, Baba was doing symbolic or really some output is delivered?
Pardon?
Grinding?
Yes.
So he was delivering some definite output or just symbolic?
No, he wasn't like that. He was very good at it. Sai Baba used to do that work also. This is the way the perfect masters feed the universe. It's part of what they have to do. Yes. Kaka Shane's brother came one day and said, he saw Baba and Nagar with 4 strangers. He was surprised to see Baba and Nagar, didn't know who these men were, but he rushed to have Baba's darshan. He bowed down, but when he got up, Baba had disappeared with the 4 strangers. So when he asked Baba about it, and the Mandali were surprised, Baba was here that day. He never left here. So Baba gave an explanation about this type of phenomenon. And gave an explanation about 3 types of powers. So this is how we get these explanations on different things. It was a natural occurrence. Some event would happen and Baba would have to explain something. This is how it happened very naturally often. At one point during that month, a message came in the evening that there was a crime and 3 people were very badly injured along the road towards Ahmednagar. So Baba sent a number of the Mandali with sticks in their hands to go up and investigate. They assumed that there were thieves along the road that would sometimes knock people over and take whatever they had. That would happen. But when they got there, about a mile away, in the ravine there, it was a very grisly scene. 1 person was dead. 2 others were very badly injured. Rustam was with them. Rustam was a very cool head, very good common sense. He immediately informed the other Mandali that he would go to the station and get an automobile of some type to bring back to transport these injured people. So that was done. In the meantime, Maruti Patel, who was also one of Baba's disciples, who was the village Patel, was told to stay at the crime scene. The other Mandali stayed there. The 1 man who was dead, his body was wrapped up. Rustam came back with the car, and then there was a discussion, where do we bring these people? Rustam says, we have the hospital right there, we bring them there. And some of the Mandali were hesitant. We don't want to get Baba involved, this is a crime. But Rustam had also called the police from Ahmednagar, informed them, and because of who he was and his natural authority, of course they knew him, they responded, he was Kanseb's son. So they brought these injured people back to Meherabad, bloody, the worst injuries they had ever seen on somebody still living. So overnight they did what they could at the hospital, washed them, dressed their wounds, stopped the bleeding. The police came, took the information, also came to Meherabad then. Baba said, at least you brought them here, the hospital is here, take care of them. Overnight that was done, the police came the next day. Actually, the head of the police in Ahmednagar district came and inspected the whole thing, inspected Meherabad, was satisfied with the story. Baba again gave another discourse that evening on death and dead bodies to help these people who had never seen such a gruesome thing to get this image out of their mind. And he pacified their emotions that way. Now, in early August, more boys were coming into the ashram, into the Hazrat Babajan school. So much so that they didn't have enough milk in the area to supply a regular ration of milk to them. So now, even the Hazrat Babajan schoolboys had to end their milk diet, which was maybe a cup a day or whatever it was for them. It was over. So they had to join the typical Mandali diet then themselves, which was what? In the morning, weak tea without milk, bakri. Lunch, rice and dal. Evening, weak tea without milk, bakri. That was the Mandali diet. Oh, you could have as much bakri as you wanted, but that's what it was. And you didn't get any, pickle with that or anything. There wasn't that kind of a thing. Bakri meant maybe salt. If you wanted more salt, you could put salt on it. Nothing more. No restriction on salt. Although they had ended the regular milk diet, that means whenever they had still those festival days, they could have tea with milk in it. So there wasn't a total stoppage of milk. It wasn't that. It was a practical austerity. That's all it was. So on August 10th, they celebrated the Parsi New Year, whatever that was at the time, one of those things. Mandali all got up at 5 a.m., had a cold bath, and then they gave Baba the ceremonial bath. Remember the description of the ceremonial bath. Baba had to tolerate this thing from all of his devotees, sit there and allow them to, one by one, take a chance to pour a mug of water over him and put their hands on his body for a few minutes as he sat there in his shorts on the stool. But again, that happened on that day. But the main thing Baba was interested in during that time was the cricket games. So there were often, during those few months, cricket games in the evenings, cricket tournaments, that was going on. They had milk tea and there were nice conversations. Since it was Parsi New Year, there wasn't discourses. It was casual conversation that evening, which they all enjoyed very much, on many subjects. A few days later, Arjun Supekar, the illiterate director of education, was ill, so Baba personally came and assumed his duties at the school, directing all the, and making sure of the, which involved a great amount of diligence regarding each of the students. Now we're talking about this thing like, there's a term for it called bilocation. A few days later, a letter came from Babu Ubale, Babu Cyclewala, one of the early Pune Mandali. In his letter, he's telling Baba about an incident. Shireen Mai and her sister and another woman were coming back from visiting Babajan one evening, and they saw Baba in a tonga get out of a tonga, and they rushed towards him and shouted, and Shireen Mai shouting, "Merog, stop!" And he just ran down a dark alley, or not ran, but walked quickly down a dark alley, and they ignored them, and they couldn't find him. So Babu Ubale is writing to Baba about Shireen Mai's complaint. Merog ignores his own mother. He just walked away quickly when I was shouting for him. How disrespectful. And he gives the date. And the date is given. The Mandali know that Baba had been sitting with them the whole time there at Meherabad. This instance of bilocation happened a number of times. Some of them are really astounding, unbelievable stories. But during this first long stay, this was not an unusual report that would come to them. They celebrated also the Parsi New Year, which is a little different than the Irani New Year. The thing to understand about the Parsis is they really love to have parties. So there are a lot of Parsi New Years. Any New Year they like to celebrate. And on that day, of course, the 5 a.m. bath in the morning, the cold bath and the whole thing. And again, a day full of cricket and tea with milk in it in the afternoon. On the 21st, Baba did something novel. he went into the ladies' compound and he said, you all are sitting here, you just work all the time, no entertainment. Today, cricket game. 2 teams. Our sister Franny, one captain, some of the other women. Divvy up and we'll begin. Baba said, I'm the umpire, and he brought only one other man, Kakashane, as the scorekeeper, who stood there on the side keeping the score, keeping track of the game. So the women in that little compound, having a lot of fun, playing cricket, shouting, played for some time, an hour or so. Franny was the champion of her team, 26 runs and something. But from that time, it was Baba was encouraging them. He didn't want the women just to get into a life of drudgery, so he insisted from that time on that they should also be involved in some kind of activity, game, sport, something, whenever they had some spare time. Ghani and Ramju, 2 of Baba's disciples, Muslims, had come to visit Meherabad for a few days. Ghani didn't want to live with Baba per se. He liked to visit. Living with Baba for him was too difficult. It was, this austerity program was a little much for him. But Ramju and Ghani were connected, and through Ramju, and the responsibility he had given by Baba to drag Ghani to make sure he would come to Meherabad, they would spend some time every month at Meherabad. It later became a rule that they had to come at least 10 days out of the month. So that was their time there. This was one of those times. And one morning, Syed Sahib, who was at the time a regular resident of Meherabad, another Muslim, obviously, they were discussing this thing, and Syed Sahib was saying, Baba's explanations he's been giving, they're just like the religions, only more. And Ramji was saying, it's nothing of the kind. His explanations are unique. I don't see any of that in the religious texts. So there was some discussion and argument going on, and Baba came in and they explained what their heated discussion was about, and then Baba gave a very nice explanation on that day about his explanations, which was that, no, you will never see, my explanations are nothing like that, because in the past, the avatars could only give explanations up to the point where people could understand those things. He said, and the problem is, it is always the fault of humanity that they misconstrue this, and a shariat gets created, a form of rigid rules that people follow so that they do not morally fall. But the mistake that people make, he says, is that they think that that external form is what is the goal. It has nothing to do with the goal. He said it can only lead one to the threshold of the path, of the spiritual path. That is the most it can do. And he went on to explain what is so unique about his discourses is that he goes in depth into explaining the mechanics through sanskaras, as no one else has ever done. But he said, now humanity in this age will be ready. It was a good explanation.
Peter,
Yes.
5 minutes break.
5 minutes break? Okay. It's taking me almost as long as it took in 1926 to experience these things.
We take a 5 minutes break.
Can you? On August 25th then, Baba suddenly that morning told the Mandali, today we begin an expansion of the school, because with the continued enrollment increase, they needed even more space. So this was the 4th major expansion of the schools. Baba worked with the Mandali himself to make sure the work would go quickly, and so that he could drive them and they would work extended hours. So that work was finished almost completely in one day, but it went again into the next day a bit also. The school examinations also happened at that time for that year. And as I told you, there was a Bombay curriculum that the school was certified for. Again, more cricket matches, and another Parsi New Year of some type was celebrated. On September 1st, Bob informed the Mandali that he was going to stop eating solid food again. And so it was the last day for them to cook. If they wanted to cook anything, they should do it on that day. So there was a hustle and bustle in the morning. They cooked things for the lunch. Baba tasted a little bit of each one, and then he served it to the Mandali as their food. On the 9th, there were these triangular cricket matches. I was saying another Parsi New Year was celebrated on that day. And then suddenly at night at 9 o'clock, now Bob had been fasting since the 2nd of September. At 9 o'clock, Baba said, "I'm in the mood to eat something, but it must be in 17 minutes. And it can only be like this. If you can do it, otherwise forget it." So there was a mad scramble. It was already night. Some of the Mandali ran to the village to see if they could find anything. It had to be bhajjas, fried like this or something like that. But they managed to hustle in 17 minutes and bring something. So with that successful effort, Baba again just tasted a little bit of each thing and gave the rest to the Mandali as prasad. On September 20th that year, let's go to the next image. Colonel Irani came to Meherabad. You remember who Colonel Irani is? Okay, he was the leading opposition to Baba in the Zoroastrian community. One sister of his was Daulat Mai, Mera and Freni's mother. Another sister of his was Freni Masi, Padri's mother. You don't see his photograph in the wedding. He may have still been an Aiden at that time. I'm not sure. But by the time he came back, that opposition to Baba in a public form had greatly increased due to his efforts. He came there to Meherabad that day in the morning with another Parsi man, a professor at a college, to talk to people and set them straight. Baba was writing that day and didn't come out. He was either in the Jopti or in the table cabin, that's unclear, but at least we know that he was busy with his writing that morning and didn't come out to greet anybody for a particular, probably till noon. Maybe it was 10:30, but it was not at that point. In the meantime, Padre said he was working in the dispensary, doing his work. He didn't even know that his uncle had come to Meherabad. He was busy with his duties. Initially, Rustam gave a tour to the two men, not even realizing that it was his wife's uncle. He didn't realize it was his wife's uncle till they ran into Behramji, who recognized him and told Rustam, "Well, this is your wife's uncle." This is the first time he had been meeting him. Imagine this division in the family at that point, where he didn't even know who his wife's uncle was. During that period, Colonel Irani somehow, though, got permission to see Daulat Mai and Mera at the post office. So he saw them and saw their condition. They're dressed in these clothes, working. They were from a wealthy, prominent family in Pune. He says, "What are you doing here? Why do you want to live like this? We like it here." "How can you like it here like this?" He said, "We want to be here with Baba." This is not right. We're serving the poor, don't you see? That's a Zoroastrian thing too. He wanted them to come and live with him and Pune and take care of them. They wanted to stay with That
Baba.
went on. Saidar Bar also was deconstructed around November 3rd. There were some elements around that were still left, but the only building that was left was the Mandali's Makani Khas, except that they took the sheet metal roof off because all of this material was to be sold in an auction. That auction happened on November 8th. But before that happened, there was a big Diwali celebration and sports programs. Baba didn't want there to be a bleak atmosphere. So every afternoon as this deconstruction was going on, there were these sports programs. A lot of cricket was being played. There was a daily cricket program, and they would serve tea, and sometimes they'd have sweets. So it wasn't a depressing atmosphere, but Baba was finishing off this phase. This first long stay phase he was finishing off. It was also, as I say, Diwali season, so he wouldn't deny them the most fun holiday of the year. So there was a meeting during early November. And Baba was fed up with this separation of kitchens and with the water. So Baba said, since all of you Hindus, this is how tactful now, this is the end of the first phase coming up, the first long stay at Meherabad. Remember, all of the work that Baba was doing was engaging all of this casteism, allowing each side, bringing up the depressed classes and allowing the higher castes to go on with their separation. Now at this point, this is how he makes the change. He says, all right, you upper caste Hindus, you don't like to mix your food with the others. Oh, you can do that. So now you have the responsibility to cook for everyone. So are you ready? Who's going to cook? Vishnu and Baal immediately said, we can't have anything to do with the cooking. Now when I hear that, knowing Vishnu, I'm quite sure that Baba beforehand tells him, this is what I'm going to do, and you have to say no. This is the plan. Vishnu didn't care. He would do anything. He was not a caste-oriented person. So Vishnu said, I can't be involved, and Baal said, I can't be involved, and the other ones, Baba knew they wouldn't want to take up the burden of the work. So they didn't. And Baba said, you see, you insist on it, yet you refuse to take the responsibility. The same issue was there with the water. So this is how Baba erased that division. So a council of the Hindus got together that evening and they came to Baba. The Hindu Mandali, I'm saying, they came to Baba and said, the thing is this, Baba, we'll go along with your abolition of differences in the communities here, but we're concerned about how it looks to the outside world. And Baba said, you're concerned with how it looks to the outside world? When I make you all high judges, then you can pass that judgment. It's my decision. And there was another issue they had. And one thing, Baba, here at Meherabad, it's all sports. We want to have more devotion. Baba said, oh, you want more devotion? Okay, I'll give you more devotion then. There will be 3 artis per day. You make damn sure all of you attend everything that happens. So from that day, they got 3 artis a day. And the people who love sports had to pay the price. So, but there was sports, not that the sports programs were abolished, but during the arty time there could be no sports. A few days later there was a protest about so many artis from some of the Mandali. So Baba said, okay, I have a better idea. All of the Mandali must keep 2 hours of silence every day, and that will happen from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. So that means you lose 1 hour of sleep, you get up at 4 a.m. and sit in silence. So Chanji described it as we were all sitting in the Makani Caste. It's wintertime, so it's cold, so we're all sitting there covered up with blankets. It looks like a bunch of corpses in a graveyard. But that's how it would happen. If you had complaints, it wouldn't improve. You would get a more stringent regime from Baba. So that's what they were learning from having their own ideas about how the program should be. The auction was on the 8th. And it was still more concerned about the water. The water at Meherabad was running out. Padri was the person who was responsible for this, and he was ill that day. Baba, that whole day, stayed apart. Now the school has been finished. The exams were taken, nothing's happening. So Baba was in the mess quarters bungalow, the old bungalow where the hospital was at that time. He was there. Kansep Kaikushu was the one who directed the auction at the time, and he was auctioning off, very good at it, auctioning off all the things, and every once in a while he would come across some item and realize, damn, that thing came from my house a year and a half ago. There were so many things that Gulmai would take from the house and just bring to Meherabad for use there, and now he was having to auction his own property off. He thought it was a humorous thing, though. The next day, somebody had complained why visitors came and they were allowed darshan. So Baba sees Pandava whispering into the ear of Kakashane, and what are you whispering in his ear? He says, Baba, you know, visitors come, strangers come, and they can have your darshan, but here we are in the last few weeks, we can't have your darshan. Baba said, okay, I'll give you one chance. We'll flip a coin. Heads you win, tails you lose. So coin was flipped, it came up heads. Before Baba could say anything, all the Mandali shouted and rushed to have his darshan. The 10th was the anniversary of the Dooni. Remember, it was lit November 10th, 1925 for the first time. So again, the Dooni was lit, and they sang a new arti that Baba had written the previous January. What was that? Bujawe, the Gujarati arti. At least an early version of it. So they sang the Gujarati arti after the Dooni was lit. And just after they finished singing the arti, it started to rain again. So remember, this time the problem was that the roof of the Mandali's quarters was sold off in the auction 2 days before. So the Mandali were all totally wet in the makan, and Baba told them, everybody get to the mess quarters bungalow. So they all moved over there, and that was a transition for them to the mess quarters bungalow from the Makan Nikas. At that time, at least. There were meetings the next few days. Baba was on the hill again with his fasting, but he came down because he said with the fasting, having to go up and down the hill was too much exertion on his health. So he just stayed down the hill. They left Meherabad on November 25th finally. That was the end of the first long stay. while they were in Lonavala, let's go to the next photograph. This photograph was taken there. You can see the date when they arrived in Lonavala. I'll tell you some of the people here. This is Masaji. He's got one of, I believe, Rustam's second son, maybe. That's Falud there. This is Adi, Baba's brother, Adi Jr. Gani. This is Bagu, Ramju's son, second son. Baba here. Ramju here, holding Melu, Rustam's first son. This is Pandaba, holding Ramju's first son, Dadu. This is Chagan here. Vishnu here. This is Rustam, Beramji, Chanji behind. I think this is Gulab Shah, one of them. This is Baba's brother Jal, Gustaji. This might be, I don't know if that is. Anyway, see who else we have here to look at. For sure that you'll, this is Sailor here, Baba's childhood friend. Abdul Tayyib, if you remember him, the guy from Lonavala, who came with his car the previous year. Pendu here. Sidhu, and one of the boys, Tukaram, from the ashram. Padri here. This is money. This is Bal and Nadisha Dastur. Anyway, very good quality photograph. They stayed in Lonavala. They went to Bombay. They started this thing to make matches. It was just another thing. One of the features with Baba was he would engage them in some business and labor which was destined to fail. And they knew it, but he wanted them to engage in those things, to have that whatever. Everything with Baba was archetypal. They were spiritual archetypes, mediums. So those things would happen. While they were there, Arjun Supikar, who was the director of education, his health was failing. And he died here in Lonavala in a clinic when Baba was in Bombay on December 22nd. They returned to Meherabad on December 25th, Christmas Day. And on that day, the Dr. Karkal, who had contracted pneumonia after Baba left, also died. So the hospital chief and the education chief of the first long stay also died, and it marked the official end of the first long stay as Baba returned to Meherabad again. Just as Nervous had died after the Gamela Yoga phase, these two men died, and that was the end of the phase. Dr. Karkal, when they disbanded the hospital, was basically gifted at a very low cost, maybe 1/8 of the cost of the supplies he paid for all of the equipment and supplies at the hospital. He was looking forward to a very successful business in Ahmednagar because he had become known as Meher Baba's doctor. Questions, by the way?
12, we can continue till 12:15
Okay.
and then break for lunch.
Let's make a start on the second long. We'll go to the next series of photographs, number 3.
What was the purpose of their visit to Lonavala?
To make a break. Specifically, Lonavala was because Gani and Ramju lived in that area. And then they were planning to go to Bombay, but on the way to Bombay, they came to Lonavala. So they were in Lonavala first. Yes, this is also one of the nice photographs taken that time, early in 1927. So they returned to Meherabad Now, Baba had told him now he's going to stop writing. This is also part of the official end of the first long stay. The first long stay was the period he wrote the book and finished writing that book there in the table cabin when it was positioned beneath the tree. So Baba wanted to stop writing on January 2nd. But one of those old Mandali, Barsop, if you recall, he was a more orthodox Muslim, had left by that point in 1926 earlier. He had left Meherabad. He had some of his own notions, agitated mind. Baba gave him a lot of time, but he left. He came back that day claiming that Babajan had given him a message that he should come and collect 2,000 rupees from Baba. And the Mandali, of course, can understand how peeved they were with this guy, but he began to pester Baba like that, and Baba tried to talk sense into him, and he wouldn't listen. Now, on that day that Baba was trying to end his communication by writing, some of the chalk and slate was left there in the mess quarters bungalow where Baba was, and in the heat of discussing with Barsop through signs, Baba apparently disregarded his intention to stop writing and picked up a slate and communicated to Barsop the final thing. And then within a few minutes he said, Jagan, this is your fault. You left these things here, and now I've broken my intention to stop writing. But anyway, Barsop was dismissed. Baba said, I'll give you a few hundred rupees. That's the end of it. He never saw Baba again. And went to Pune and posed as Babajan's chargeman for a while, but got no traction, of course. It was just a person who... This was not unusual. There are many people who came into Baba's contact with notions and they couldn't really make the grade. He was an example, an early example of one. Baba then officially did begin intensifying his silence by not writing the next day. And at first, of course, it was gestures. There was some problems, so Baba would take the newspaper and point to letters on it, on the front of the newspaper. But they realized quickly that it wasn't right. Pendu asked Vishnu to get some letters printed. They had some larger letters printed. One of the Mandali had a printing press in Nagar. So then they decided they're going to make larger letters even than that. So they did a sizable thing like this. At first it was paper. The paper was glued onto cardboard. And then they made thin wooden boards with the letters painted on them. Baba, within a short time, they realized he needed numbers, so they also Baba wanted the numbers on the bottom. So that's how the alphabet board came into effect within a week of Baba intensifying his silence at the beginning of what we call the second long stay at Meherabad. It became the medium of his communication till 1954, 28 years later. Just about. Almost 28 years later. This photograph was taken in Ahmednagar on January 11th. Baba visited some of his devotees in Ahmednagar, and he was asked to sit in Shah Studios for this portrait. The next day, Baba went to Pune, Rustam driving, with Daulat Mai and Mera. Padri also accompanied them. Maybe Abdullah Jafar was there because he was the lawyer in Pune. Why were they in Pune? That was the day that Daulat Mai and Mera, and Freni was also with them, signed the remainder of their estate over to Baba The proceeds of that were used to fund all the education that Baba wanted to do for the second long stay at Meherabad. Also, some of that money was sent to Iran. Now, Baidul was back in Iran, and a school was opened in the name of Jahangir, Daulat Mai's husband, who had died some years before. So a charitable school for poor Zoroastrian boys in Iran was started in the name of Mehra's father with some of that money. Now imagine Colonel Irani. This is just Meher Baba doing, again, just giving him a jab. That's the way he felt about it. Meher Baba is doing exactly what Colonel Irani thought he would do all along. Take the money of guileless people and make a show of charity, in his view. And that was the result. Baba wanted to continue this opposition throughout his life. He didn't want any. Baba would explain to them, "No, let him go. He needs to do that. This is what gives the force. This is what gives the force to the work, the manifestation of the work into the world. There has to be opposition. That opposition is what gives that force into the world." So, there was discussion about this new program. When Baba had returned to Meherabad, those boys had given actual written vows to stay with Baba, to promise to be with him. Why would Baba do that? So that they wouldn't leave, because it was more than education, it was his work through them as archetypal mediums that he was focused on, and he didn't want to break in that. So they had signed agreements that they would stay with Baba for a certain period of time at least. So when Baba returned to Meherabad, those boys were there. He didn't leave. The thing to remember is when Baba shut down the ashram the previous October, November, what the Mandali observed was that each individual was carefully interviewed and taken care of before they left by Baba. It wasn't that just you go away, I have nothing to do with you. He carefully took care of each of them. Some of the older boys who didn't want to further their education were placed in employment in Ahmednagar. The boys who did want to further their education were kept at Meherabad, still studying in the mess quarters bungalow, and Baba had called that school the interim school. Interim means the phases between the first and second long stay. So that was continuing there, and when Baba returned, they said, "Here we are, you asked us for a commitment, so we're still waiting." Baba says, "Yes, we haven't forgotten you," and the schooling of those boys continued. But there was a new idea now. Baba wanted to also increase the quality of the education, and there were discussions about what the new school would be. Baba was going to use the funds he got from the estate of Daulat Mai to fund this new project. We'll talk about that after the lunch break. Okay?